So Srinivas, let's just start with the definition of reasoning and why it matters for the enterprises here in the room that AI models are capable of reasoning. What is OpenAI's definition of reasoning, and why does it matter to a corporate enterprise?
Yeah, so reasoning fundamentally is the ability for AI systems to think longer and solve more complex problems, right? So if you ask a human a very simple question, we almost immediately give you an answer. If I ask you a hard math question, you can't give an answer immediately. You may have to think much longer about this. You might have to reason through this. You might and so fundamentally, the ability for an AI system to do that and take more complex tasks and think longer and be able to evaluate whether it's on the right track, that's what we call as reasoning.
And is reasoning also what puts us onto the path to artificial general intelligence, or AGI, which OpenAI has talked a lot about? What does that mean, and is reasoning on the path towards it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the word AGI has lots of different interpretations and meanings, but one way we have talked about it is that the ability for AI to solve economically valuable tasks, right? And so there are a lot of tasks in the world that are important for us as a society, and to do them, you need to be able to handle complex tasks and think through problems deeper. So yeah, absolutely, I think it's on the path.
Okay, so one of the things that we've talked about earlier today is this idea of AI agents, and OpenAI, you've released your own AI agents, one of which is called Operator, which is an agent that can use a computer on behalf of humans, and another called Deep Research, which generated a lot of excitement for its ability to do information research on behalf of humans. Tell us a little bit about how those agents have been used amongst your customers and the people who use ChatGPT.
Yeah. First, I would just also say that we've talked about agents, but really zooming back, this is just an incredible time that we are living through in technology. And I think we've been talking about AI as being one of the most, it's probably the biggest technological transformation of our lifetimes. But I do think this year especially is going to showcase that in a very profound way. And just to give you an example before I answer a question, we recently launched O1 and then O3 Mini. And more recently, we even showed how the model thinks. We improved what we call the chain of thought summarizer. And when you look at the model and when you pose it a complex, say, a math problem or a science problem, and then you look at the responses and you see how it's thinking through it, you get goosebumps sometimes. And I think that's just it's so magical to be able to have these AI systems that are thinking through complex problems. So I just want to say it's just incredibly exciting. And to answer your question, how people are using this, I'll give you a few examples. So I think there's a company, Oscar Health, that is using it to understand patient outcomes in a much better way through reasoning models.
And it's using the Operator agent, or the?
No, that's actually using our fundamental O1 model.
Okay.
I'll come to Operator and Deep Research in a second, but one way you can think of Operator and Deep Research is there is a base reasoning model. Our latest one is O3 Mini. We started with O1, and then that'll continue. And then things like Operator and Deep Research are things that are kind of built on top, and that are specialized for those specific tasks. I'm going to start with the base reasoning models and how they're used, and then we can talk specifically about Operator and Deep Research. So O1 is used by Oscar Health that I mentioned. Reasoning models are also used in biosciences. So there's really interesting use by a company for doing better estimation of clinical trial outcomes, so that then they're using that answer to figure out which drugs to put out for drug discovery. There's an amazing example from Berkeley National Lab where they're trying to use reasoning models to understand what genes may be, or what mutated genes may be causing these symptoms for rare diseases, right? So these are incredibly powerful examples where reasoning models are helping us in these really difficult and complex problems for us to solve. There's also use for it beyond healthcare in areas like tax analysis. Mm-hmm. And so it's quite varied. I think we're seeing this use for strategizing through problems. We are using it for researching problems. We're using it for coding. Mm-hmm. We'll come to maybe later.
Right.
And yeah, so there's a very wide set of uses. So that's sort of on how people are using reasoning models. Now we're using reasoning for also a couple of examples you talked about, Deep Research, which we launched fairly recently, and then Operator. Deep Research is the system where you can take a reasoning model and try to do tasks that you might want to do advanced research. Maybe you are analyzing the finances of a company or of an entire sector. And we typically do searches, we click through documents, we read through documents, we look for certain pieces of information, we put that in and we try to summarize it, we might do follow-up searches. So now we have these AI models that is capable of automating this on our behalf. And one analogy you can think about is that a human might take several hours to complete these tasks. Typically, if I ask you tell me how the retail industry has changed in the last decade, right? That's not a very obvious task. Like, you're probably going to spend hours coming up with a research report. Now we have models that is capable of doing that, right? And it's probably going to finish that in an order of minutes and come back with you with an answer. So that, I think, is an incredibly powerful tool. Operator is another example where we can now have AI systems that can operate on our behalf within a browser context. So if you want to make a reservation at a restaurant for this weekend, but you kind of know like what you want, and then say, make me a reservation for a Mexican restaurant this weekend, it knows to go search OpenTable, it knows what you like, it's like, oh, is this available? And it can automate that on our behalf, right? You can click through links and things.
Right.
So I think we have deployed these, and I think it's still early days, and we're going to learn a lot from how people are using it.
Right. Well, one of the things that you mentioned in terms of the excitement of working in AI at this period of time that I want to ask you about is the emergence of Deepseek, the Chinese AI firm, and its own R1 model, which is a reasoning model, and this idea that there's a lot of downward pressure on sort of foundation models across the board because supposedly Deepseek's R1 model was trained for just a few $1 million, supposedly. And so what does the release of a model like Deepseek's R1 mean for your own O1, O3, O3 mini reasoning models? And is there a price pressure for you?
Yeah, I think what Deepseek showed is that you can actually have a good model for in more cost-effective ways than the current generation of models we had launched before. But I would say it's just a technology trend they've showed another point in that trend, right? So if you look at our own models, over the last few years, the price of a GPT-4o model has come down 150 times within a matter of a couple of years, right? And so you're going to see a continuous trend in which highly capable models are going to continue to get cheaper. And Deepseek, I think, had some innovations there, and they demonstrated another point in that price capability curve. And we're going to continue our trends, and you're going to see our models getting cheaper as well. So, I think what they proved is that this trend is going to continue, and you're going to see us and other companies probably also do that.
One of the things that you've said in response to Deepseek is that you are investigating whether Deepseek used or distilled your training data, your models, in creating its own model or its own chatbot. So what is the status of that investigation? Are you still looking into whether that was the case?
Yeah, we're still looking into it, and we are evaluating it. I think we don't have anything concrete to share. If depending on the evaluations, we might be able to share something later. But more importantly, I think the important trend is that we're going to continue to have amazing models at much lower price points than before. And there's also this general trend about distillation, right? And distillation means you can build a smaller model that can learn from a larger model. And we have distillation actually as a feature in our own platform end to end. So this is not the first time. We can actually fine tune a mini model on top of, like, for example, a 4o fine-tuned model, a 4o model. And you can do that end to end in our platform. And that means that companies can get highly capable models for their specific tasks at much lower price points than before, right? And so I think that as a trend you're going to continue to see, and you're going to continue to see that on reasoning models too. And one of the most amazing things is that we have this now process called reinforcement fine-tuning that can take the same reasoning technologies that we have used to develop our own models, and we are offering that to our customers to be able to fine-tune smaller models for their specific tasks using the same reasoning technology. So I think the trend about all of this kind of points to that, right? Which is that you can get smaller models that are cost effective for specific tasks.
Right, and I think this may resonate for a lot of the enterprises in the room, but to what extent will costs come down for your reasoning models, for your most powerful models? You talk about how the costs for some of them have come down at least 150 times, but there's still quite a ways to go, right? So how much cheaper can they get?
I think I would just use the historic trend. I think generally I would say in a given year, the price has come down probably 10x for a similar capability. There's lots of innovation that happens both when we build next generation models, but also in how we optimize these models to run more efficiently on a GPU fleet. And I think that trend is going to continue.
Okay. I want to ask you about Stargate, which is this supposed $500 billion venture, this joint venture that you announced with President Trump alongside SoftBank and Oracle at the White House. Why does OpenAI need all of this compute? And the answer may be obvious, and you may be saying, Belle, you should know this, but can you tell the audience why you need so much compute and what that will enable? Maybe it's better reasoning models, maybe it's AGI. What is it for?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of dimensions. One is in order to advance intelligence, we know that there are certain scaling laws, right? Which is you apply more compute, you apply more data, and also there's, of course, algorithmic innovations. We can continue to get better models, which are more intelligent, and we have unlocked kind of two different dimensions of scaling. The first dimension of scaling is what we used to have in the GPT era, where you're training these large language models. And the second dimension is we unlocked is you can apply more compute during what we call as inference, when you're asking questions and the model is responding. And that is another dimension with which we can scale models. So first, we believe that with more compute, you can continue to build better, more advanced intelligent models. The second is, once you have, we talked about the cost of these models coming down. What that means is that the opportunities for building applications and to deliver benefits is just enormous. Every time cost comes down, you're enabling an entirely new series of applications that is more affordable for people all over the world. So a huge part of what we need in the infrastructure is also to be able to deploy these models for all the various applications, incredible applications that people are building. So I think in some ways this revolution is going to be very profound, much like electricity maybe 100, 120 years ago. And so I think we need a lot of infrastructure to be able to really deliver the benefits of AI to all of humanity.
So is it really on the inference side, the using the model side, that sort of the AI usage will move to? And I also wonder, did Deepseek kind of, at least I think to the news media and a lot of us in Silicon Valley, made us think that, did we over-index on the GPU side? Did we try and amass too many graphics processing units? And we all saw what happened in this sort of market correction with NVIDIA. So are you saying that, is it on the inference side that?
No, it's both on training and inference. I think I mentioned that. It is not just on inference, it's both on training and inference. I think the market correction is over-exaggerated. I also think it's important to realize that there is a lot of research that goes behind the scenes before you train a model. And sometimes when you talk about the cost of training a model, you have to include the entire cost of all the different research experiments you're running, and that gets lost sometimes in the headlines. And in order to lead, there's an enormous amount of research that goes behind the scenes, right? It's not the final, you do like 100 experiments before you decide which experiment you want to proceed on. And so those don't get accounted for in some of these headlines, so you have to consider.
So is it feasible that Deepseek trained its model on just a few $1 million? Is that what we're talking about?
So I think there is a very different question about what does it take to run a single run versus what does it take to have a system that can continuously produce research innovation.
So is that a no, maybe?
I can't speak for them because I don't have insights into how everything was done, but I'm giving you an insight from how in general the research works. And then there's a very different system for, there is a lot of research that happens behind the scenes. And then when you train a single model, the cost of that single model, that could be very different, but you have to add all of this in aggregate.
I want to ask you a question about the sort of engineering challenges around being at such a sort of important AI company at this pivotal period of time. When you're building for these hard problems, like the enterprises that want to use your products, as well as the consumers, the millions of consumers who are using your products, I also wonder if all the headlines, especially the latest around Elon Musk providing this takeover bid to the tune of $97.4 billion for OpenAI, does that become a distraction to you? It's something that we heard Brett Taylor, the chairman of your board, talk about earlier today. How do you stay focused on building and solving for the hard challenges when there's so much going on around you?
I'll focus on the engineering challenges. I think Brett and Sam have answered the other question about Elon already, and I can just repeat their answer. The mission or the company is not for sale. The engineering challenges are actually incredibly exciting, right? And so obviously there's a lot of interesting challenges in how we build models, how do we scale these models, and Every new model has a new scalability limit that we are hitting on infrastructure. So there's enormous amounts of engineering challenges in training models. There's really interesting challenges in how do you optimize inference, how do you bring costs down. But there's also enormous engineering challenges for us in deploying these products at scale. Our products have grown just incredibly fast, and probably one of the fastest growing products in the history, if not it's probably the fastest growing product. So that means how do you prepare your engineering organization to scale? There's also interesting challenges because once you take AI and deploy it in the real world, it has to learn to interact with all the systems that people care about. It has to interact with the various applications that are in an enterprise. It has to understand the unique data sets that enterprises have, right? And so there is a lot of engineering innovation that we also have to build in enabling the AI to understand applications, understand documents, and all of those things. And I think there is going to be a tremendous amount of innovation and opportunity in doing that. And as we prepare for an agentic future, how do you enable enterprises to automate workflows using this agentic technology? What are the primitives that we need to build? How do we make it as simple as possible? How do we make it cost effective? I think there's a fascinating engineering challenges.
So can we expect to see more product innovation directly from OpenAI in that regard, where you have specific sectors like healthcare or legal or retail that have very different uses for your technology, though you've often talked about it as a sort of general, we're everything for everyone. But do you expect to build more specific, maybe vertical tools, for instance?
So we are enabling lots of other people to do that, and what we are generally doing is building the tools that enable other people to build all these applications. And the set of tools that we will build will be very general in nature, right? It will enable a healthcare company, it will enable a financial company to take our models, take our tools, and figure out how to integrate it within, and then build these amazing applications on top of them.
Okay. But what about for the companies that need something more from you? Do you expect that you might release something like a bespoke tool or something more custom?
I think customization is a very big part of our strategy. And we have already launched a whole suite of customization tools for enabling companies to customize GPT-4o, for example. And more recently, we launched this tool called reinforcement fine-tuning, which is incredibly exciting, right? Which is that with this new reasoning paradigm, if you can express certain workflows or tasks in your company and provide a way to evaluate the answer, you can now build customized models that can learn from that with very, very few examples. Sometimes it's just on the order of tens of examples. That is a very profound shift from the previous era of customization. In the previous era, you need thousands, maybe even more. But now with very few examples, the reasoning models generalize really well. I think that is enormously exciting. And basically, the fundamental primitive is take any task, figure out how you want to think through it, and find a way to evaluate it. If you can express your jobs to be done, or if you express your problem in that way, you're going to have AI that is going to be amazing at it. And that is just a fundamentally amazing primitive for us to have.
I want to ask about the amazing AI you have and ask about the importance of it being proprietary, that it's sort of locked behind closed doors rather than open source. And I know that you do open source some of your models. But not too long after the release of Deepseek's R1 model, your CEO, Sam Altman, said that we may be on the wrong side of history here. Maybe we need a new open source strategy. So I wonder, what do you make of that statement? Does it mean that you do need to start open sourcing O1, O3? What does that mean?
Yeah, we are having internal discussions, and I think we've always, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that when we talk to our customers, it's not just about whether a model is open source. They care about an entire ecosystem. They care about having models at a very high quality of service, that is cost effective, that is easy to use, that is customizable. And I think for our mission to deliver benefits to humanity, we believe that building those products is also really, really important. In addition to that, I think as Sam said, we're going to have internal discussions on whether we want to rethink any of them. Historically, we've always been worried about the safety of our frontier models being open source because it's very hard to understand the risk and the different ways in which people can use them. And so as we learn more, we're going to learn and adapt our strategy as well. But to come back to what maybe enterprises care about, it's not just about whether the model or the weights are open source. They care about actually having an amazing product that is easy to use and it can solve their problem, that's cost effective. And that's what we hear consistently, and we're going to continue building that too.
Okay, great. I want to make sure that we have time for audience questions here, and I see quite a few. I think, Larry, you were one of the first to raise your hand. Oh, the gentleman back there, actually. Oh, go ahead, Larry.
Thank you for what you do. Amazing time. A year and a half or so ago, Meta released Cicero, which basically is a plays a game of diplomacy. They injected customized strategic reasoning with language models to play the game. It plays quite well. My question is, how far away are we from a time when mere mortal companies like ours or mine can take our own specialized reasoning models and deploy them with a tool like yours and get, like, not in the domain of game playing, but in our domain, similar kinds of capabilities, like real agentic behavior that has embodied our proprietary logic for doing fairly complicated tasks?
Absolutely. I actually think this is the time, and our reinforcement fine-tuning product should enable exactly the use cases that you're talking about, which is every business, every enterprise has a very custom task. You have a certain thought process. If you can objectively figure out how to evaluate the thought process, we now have generalizable models that can learn that very quickly. So I would absolutely try that and experiment with it.
Yes, in the blue.
Hi, Srinivas, it's Madhu.
Hi.
Question to you, when do you will build a operator-like model to build the application itself? Will you move into the application side? And if so, what is the time frame?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah,
Sorry.
like the operator is doing the operating the thing, when will you come with a model which will actually build the app itself, the SaaS applications?
I think there's, one is that the quality of the coding models that we have is improving quite a bit, right? And today people are using assistive coding for all kinds of software, right? Both within their IDEs, but also even within ChatGPT, we have the ability to create lightweight applications. You can create JavaScript, you can create simple websites. So I think the technology to create simple applications very easily is already there. And as the reasoning capabilities of the models improve, you should be able to use them to create more and more complex applications on your behalf. So I think one of the areas where we will see reasoning models deployed is in the area of coding. And as that complexity or that reasoning quality improves, you should be able to create more complex applications fairly easily.
Yes, Satish. We're going to have a mic runner up heading your way.
Srinivas, thank you. Exciting times indeed. I work in a financial institution organization. One of the slight roadblocks for broad adoption and adaptability of OpenAI is the question of explainability. And I'm excited to hear you talk about chain of thought. Can you expand on it and see how we can adopt it?
Yeah. So I think the chain of thought is basically the inner monologue. In some ways you can think about it. Like if I ask you a complex question, you're kind of thinking through it and coming up with an answer. That monologue that goes through in the model is what we call as the chain of thought. That is basically the reasoning process that it is using to come up with an answer. And most recently, we used to summarize those chains of thoughts and then provide them as summarized COTs in the product. And now we have expanded on them, and you can get a lot more insight into what the chain of thought process looks like. And I actually think it's one of the most powerful tools for explainability, which is people have always asked, how are you coming up with these answers? And like, well, this is how I thought about the problem. Here's how I evaluated it, and here's why I think that's the right answer, right? And so I think it is a very big step forward to helping people have answers around explainability. Yeah.
And Shamim?
Thank you. Srinivas, Shamim Mohammed with CarMax, CIO and CTO. So we've been a very early adopter of OpenAI, a big fan of it. Before, we're using OpenAI ChatGPT before people knew what OpenAI ChatGPT was, so it's been cool.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of different tools and applications within the company. Some are customer-facing, some are internal. So one primary question or concern we have still to work through is, how do we make sure the proprietary information we have, proprietary data we have, the knowledge we have from a competitive perspective, we're not using that to make the model smarter that's available to others, right? That's one thing that we have to walk the fine line and balance it, because obviously we got that knowledge for over 30 years that differentiates us. We don't want to give that same knowledge and train a model the competitor might be able to take advantage of.
Absolutely. We take this super seriously, and for all of our enterprise and Teams customers and for API, we do not train on your data. And so that's a promise that we have made, and you should have complete confidence. We are happy to work with you and tell you how things work, but basically, yeah, we do not train on our customers' data.
All right, I think we have time for one, maybe two more questions. I think over here we have one, the gentleman in the jacket.
Hi, Stephen Carvelli. Question for you around operator. What's generally next? Because it's such a it's one of the capabilities from an agent standpoint we've all looked forward to, and there's just myriad of use cases, obviously.
Yeah, I think it's super exciting. I think we want to iteratively learn how people are using it. We want to the confidence in the model's abilities to do certain actions. When does it check with you? I mean, today we have restrictions and guardrails on if you want to, before paying something, I want to ask you for confirmation, right? So I think there's just a wide variety of use cases that we expect people to use it for and deploy it. But then, since it's early enough, we will also want to learn iteratively on how well it's working in all these use cases. More broadly, what you can imagine is that the quality of the models is going to improve. You're going to build more trust with the models. You're going to build trust because you also expect it to confirm with you on when you want you to provide input versus have the model go do its things. And these are things we're going to learn and iterate. And more broadly, the operator should not just work in a browser. It should probably be able to handle an entire computer or any different environment. So I think there's lots of other dimensions that it's going to grow into as well.
So still a vision for a human in the loop.
Yes, yeah. We want it to operate on your behalf with your consent and with your preferences, absolutely.
Well, I have one final question for you, Srinivas. I know that most, if not all, the folks in this room have used ChatGPT or some version of GPT. How does OpenAI use its own products? How do you use ChatGPT or any version of your APIs?
Yeah, we use it for lots of different things. As an engineer, I'll start with that, and then I'll talk about the other functions.
We'll make it quick because I threw this question in at the end.
Engineers, we use it for coding as a coding assistant. We use it to find bugs in our code. We have lots of Slack channels where people ask questions about certain technologies or certain APIs, and we have automated assistants that help answer these questions. Knowledge sharing internally, like there's always projects going around in a company and like, oh, what is that project? Like, well, how do I learn more about it? We have a tool that does that. So you can just go, what does project X mean? And it'll give you a nice summary. And beyond engineering, we have our finance team use it for, we do lots of legal contracts with various vendors. They use these models to analyze these contracts and like see if there are any subtle things we should know about. We use it for customer service and answering questions inbound and automating that. So it's just used all across.
I think that may be refreshing for some of the folks in the room because that's also what they're using AI for. So thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.